Hey gang, welcome back to Let's Level Up. My name is Rick and with me is
Bevan.
And together we're here to talk about Neon City Rumble. This is a new game from Booyah Games, designed by a guy named Davey Wagnerok. And it's actually a pretty neat fighting game.
Neon City Rumble, it's a 1 versus 1, although I believe there are rules for multiple players, more than 2. In it, you pick a roster of 5 characters, and you have 3 in your tarmac at any given time, with 2 waiting in the wings to come in and fight. Mm-hmm. And your 3 active players on the tarmac are against each other with kind of an attack and defend mechanism that is powered by energy called neon.
Mm-hmm. So basically, the method of combat is going to be very asymmetrical. On my turn for combat, I'm going to be the engaging player, the attacking player, and Bevan would be the defending player. The next turn, our roles will be reversed. He'll be attacking and I'll be defending. There is a setup strike for super moves at the beginning and at the end of every turn, and then you'll basically use your neon to launch those super moves against your buddies. One thing that I really liked about this game is how well it encapsulates the essence of a fighting game. If I throw a punch, you're going to want to dodge out of that punch or block out of that punch. And you're going to basically be able to do that. Now, a lot of people, whenever they think of tabletop fighting games, they think of paper, rock, scissors. And it can be perceived like that, but I think fighting games in general can be perceived like that as well. It's paper, rock, scissors, what'd you say, times 8?
Yeah, it's like we're playing paper, rock, scissors, but each of us has 4 arms, and we're each throwing out 4 different symbols, and then kind of everything against everything. There's a lot of interplay back and forth between I might throw an attack that he blocks, and then because he blocked it, I don't do damage, but then he powers up his block, and it just goes back and forth and back and forth.
I really like the idea, if you play Magic the Gathering, you know about the stack. So I can play an ability here, and then you can play something to counter that on top of it. And then I could counter your counter, and then we can keep going, and then it all resolves back down to see whether my ability got played or not. And Neon City Rumble has a lot of really cool advanced mechanics like that. When you factor in that I can also have weapons and items and other things like that to make the combat more diverse, and including was a stack of like 60 different characters, I think.
It was quite a few.
Yeah, there are a ton of characters to pick from. There's a whole lot of game in such a little box. So follow us now to the table. We're going to show you how the game is played, and then after that, give you our final thoughts. Here we have the contents of Neo City Rumble kind of spread out on the table. And as you can see, we're going to have 4 major decks that we're going to play with, along with a very large player pool to choose from for our characters. There are going to be dice to roll throughout the game, coins to flip, and then you'll have actually included counters for you to count the amount of damage. The first player token is going to pass back and forth during the game, so that way you'll know who is attacking and who is defending on that turn. Each of these 4 main decks have their own set purpose, right? So the brawl deck is what you're going to be used to do your basic brawl attacks, from throwing an attack like a punch. Let me just tighten up on that just a bit. So throwing a punch attack versus blocking. So the block is going to defend, the attack is going to be the punch. So depending on what phase you're playing, you'll assign this to one of your characters in front of them. We also have a defend and an uppercut. So this parry here is going to cancel a punch. This uppercut is going to basically throw the uppercut during the attack phase. So black is going to be the attack, white is going to be the defense, and there's also opportunities for you to slot neon here to buff up this attack. So if you do a successful parry, there's a chance that you could actually do damage with this by throwing in and slotting 2 rage here. Each rage you put in there is going to actually equal 1 more damage. And if your fighter happens to specialize in parrying, you could even increase some more damage there and do a ton of damage here on the actual defense. Alternatively, you have 2 toxic slots here for this uppercut that you can slot in. And neon's going to be the currency and actually the next deck that we're going to talk about. So neon, we're going to have 4 different types of neon, from Cosmo to Toxic to Chrome, and then finally to Rage. And there are 3 different types of each. There's Natural, which is going to be a 1 point. There's Super, which is worth 2 points. And then there's Ultra, which is going to be worth 3 points. At the beginning of the game, you're going to get 1 neon, but you're only going to be able to get neon either through buying it from the pit stop after that, or by successfully dealing damage during the brawl phase. There are 2 additional decks here, one for items, and items could be anything from one-shot VHS tapes to walls that are actually protect you from doing damage, to gambling, which allows you to let you discard or force your opponent to discard cards, or you can potentially discard cards and then gain additional ones. So it's a gamble. You don't know what you're going to get usually with that. There are different threads that you can equip to your characters, and also food that you're going to be used to actually heal up on. There's a ton of different items in here and a ton of different cards into the item deck. The only way you're going to get these is through the pit stop by banking currency and buying it additionally on your turn. The same goes for weapons. And I'm sorry, that's not quite true. If you do play the advanced mode, there is a way for you to have a challenge here. And on the bottom of the card, you'll actually see that this one says you cancel 2 counters from going off. So if you cancel 2 counters from going off, you can be able to draw this weapon card. But weapons are actually really cool. You use this in just like you would an item. Basically, you replace the brawl type that you have, and then you use this weapon on your turn. So this is a knife weapon. This is a broken bottle, and you're going to flip a coin here. If heads, your opposing fighter takes 1 damage. If tails, the opposing fighter takes at this location takes 1 damage and can't use strikes or counters during the next combat round. Here we have a telephone pole, Molotov cocktail, a shotgun, a claymore, the Magnum XL sword, an airstrike, a plank. So there's a ton of different weapon types here included in the game, from throwing weapons to bludgeoning weapons to actual knives and swords and stuff. It's a lot of really cool flavor comes in the weapon and items deck. And in fact, whenever we were playing the game for the first time, I wasn't really into it until a couple turns later, where I really figured out how the pit stop system worked, and then was able to bank additional money. Bank cards and get money to buy items and weapons, which is really cool. The coin here is going to be used a lot. It's going to determine who the first player is. It's also going to determine a lot of the different strikes and ability cards that you may get throughout the game. And sometimes you'll have to roll dice depending on what your character is as well. So at the beginning of the game, before we actually pick, we'll pick our characters first, but before we get into that, you're going to draw 3 brawl cards off the top at the beginning of the game and 1 neon. The only time you ever get neon free in the game is during that first phase. Neon is going to cost you $2 basically to get after that, or you'll have to deal damage. So let's take a look at some of the characters here. In Neon City Rumble, we're going to have a ton of characters to choose from. It's going to be basically like a dodgeball pick, where the active player picks first, and then the opposing player pick 1 character, and you'll do that until both players have a roster of 5. So I've gone ahead and just picked 5 random characters out, and we're going to talk about them. So you can see their full art here on the back of each of the cards, along with a little bit of flavor text there at the bottom, but it's really this side of the card that's going to mean the most. And I'm just going to get a little tighter here, so that we can talk about it. So here we have Squirrel Boy. Squirrel Boy has 4 hit points. He has a revive cost of 1, so you can be able to bring him back fairly cheaply. He's got a block is his special attack, and he also has a special item of food, which means when he uses these, he's going to get bonuses. This section of the card is for the strike phase, and this section of the card is for the counter phase. So throughout the game, you're going to have the active player doing a strike. You're going to have the brawl phase, which you're basically going to exchange cards, and then you're going to have the counter phase, in which the defending player will have a chance to utilize any counters that he has ability or has the currency for. And the currency is all going to be neon here. So in order to do Squirrel Boy's strike here, I'm going to have to pay 3 toxic. To do his counter, I'm going to have to do 2 Cosmo. Let's see if we can get a little closer here. Okay, so his strike says you're going to create a wall of bubbles in front of a friendly fighter. This fighter receives +3 shield during the combat round, so that way you can protect them from getting KO'd. Also, he has a counter. It says all of your opponent's fighters that use Rage receive -1 strike when defending during the next combat round. So he's basically going to be able to mitigate a ton of damage if you play him right. And then at the bottom we have here the nickname. It's Squirrel Boy, his age, his hobbies, and then his fighting style, which is Bubble Shot. We have Rasputin here, and Rasputin's really cool. Rasputin allows us to do a couple things. One, he's weak in health as well, but he's going to come back fairly easily, and that's Rasputin's main ability, right, to be able to come back. He's got a super duck that he'll get bonuses on, and he's also able to revive himself with food, or that have bonuses with food. His strikes are really cool, I think, and maybe one of the most powerful abilities here. So actually, not his strike, his counter is going to be the powerful ability. But here we have your opponent must reveal their entire hand to you, and then for the for the counter, you have your opponent is not awarded brawl at the next pit stop, which is big. Every turn, your player is going to get 3 brawl cards. If you get a sizable card advantage over your opponent, you're going to be able to deal a ton of damage. It's expensive. It's going to cost 3 toxic versus his strike, which is 1 toxic and 1 rage, but still really cool. Here we have Valkyrie, and I wanted to show you Valkyrie because she's got a really cool counter ability here. You can discard any 3 cards and recover 2 hit points from one fighter that's on the tarmac. And the tarmac is going to be both your roster and the characters that you have in your bench, which is cool. And then finally, we've got Beatman and Ash Blitzer. So just to go through Ash, Ash is cool. He's going to focus on punching. You can see that it's going to be an attack because the circle is black compared to the circles that were white before, which again will let you know that it comes from a brawl card. He gets bonuses to sword weapons. His strike, you're going to roll a die. On a 1, and let's see if we can get a little closer on here again. So on a 1, you're going to deal 1 damage to himself. On a 2 to 4, you're going to deal 1 damage to the opposing fighter. On a 5, you're going to deal 2 damage, and on a 6 you're going to deal 3 damage, and that's just during the strike, and that strike is very easy to obtain. It's only 2 rage, which is cool. His counter is also very cool. If you have a toxic, if a friendly fighter was KO'd this round, Ash may draw 1 sword from the pit stop. Afterwards, you reshuffle the weapon deck, so you'll be able to just get him swords, so again, he can deal more damage. He gets +1 damage when he deals any bladed weapon damage. So you're going to take your 5 fighters, and we're going to arrange them on the tarmac with 3 active and then 2 and kind of waiting in the wing on the bench. And the way I'll do that here is I'll just take Ash in the middle, Valkyrie here, and then we'll throw Squirrel Boy in defense, and then we'll have just 2 waiting in the bench here at the bottom of the deck. Now, so when the round starts, what we're going to do is we're going to execute a strike. Whoever is the active player, whoever is going to be attacking, will have their first strike phase. So on here, with any neon that you may have, you'll be able to execute any strikes. So I have this 1 super toxic here, which means I have basically 2 toxic as currency. So I'm not going to do any of my strike abilities. If this was 2 rage, it'd be able to do Ash's super strike. You'll notice here on all the strike cards, and basically every card can be countered by a certain type. Brawls are countered by the appropriate blocks, and Neon is canceled with Neon. You can also cancel items and weapons that are being used with the appropriate brawl type, which is really interesting to me. Here, any type of toxic is countered by Cosmo, but you have to meet the level of Cosmo there. So a natural Cosmo wouldn't be able to cancel my super toxic. I'd have to have 2 Cosmo to deal with that. So once an item plays, it's kind of played on the stack, and then your opponent can play a card, and then you can play another card until both players pass, and then you see if the ability resolves. So you can actually get into a situation where you're really, really betting the farm. And so what happened when Bevan and I played, he was going to do one of his powers. I canceled one, he canceled mine, and then I ended up canceling his, and he kind of overcommitted really to that attack and wasn't able to do things later in the round, which again, as there's so many opportunities in this game that you're going to be able to be really strategic with your choices, and your decisions that you make are very important in this game. You can make decisions that really kind of throw you out if you need it. So I don't have a lot of variety here in my attacks. I've got an uppercut. I've got 2 kicks. Valkyrie here, and let me just focus. Valkyrie specializes in uppercuts. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to place my uppercut face down. I'm going to place my 2 kicks here. So what I've done is basically skip the strike phase, and we're going straight to the brawl phase. So what we'll do from this point is we'll flip our cards at the same time, and your opponent will have cards that they're flipping as well. So that's a very good card, a sucker punch, a defense, and a parry. So you can see here, the parry is going to block punches. It's not going to block my kick. The duck is not going to block my kick either. I need a block to block that kick. So both of these attacks get through. Since neither one of these attacks were my specials, there's not going to be any special damage awarded on top of it. It's just going to deal 1 damage to the defending player, and I'll be able to, at the end of the turn, get Neon. But what happened here is that our opponent played a Sucker Punch, and there are only 2 Sucker Punch cards in the Brawl deck. You're going to remove the other 2 at the beginning of the game. But a Sucker Punch is an immediate counterattack, and basically I take my cards back. But this sucker punch is canceled by a sweep. If I happen to use a sweep attack, this one wouldn't go through. But since I did an uppercut, it's going to go through. You're going to roll a d6. Both fighters either take 1 point of damage, 2 to 5, the opponent takes 2 damage, or 6, the opponent takes 3 damage. So this is a very, very powerful card that you'll be able to get throughout the game. But again, it can be countered, so there's a chance that the sucker punch doesn't go off. But if it does, it is going to be devastating. And in this case, it does. So what we'll do is we'll roll that. I got a 5, which means my Valkyrie just took 2 points of damage. And we'll take this, put it on there, and then that way I know that I've got the damage there. So when we're awarding Neon at the end of the turn, I'm going to get 2 Neon for dealing damage with 2 characters, and then my opponent's actually going to get a Neon for successfully dealing damage with one of their characters. So they'll get that. Now, see here, all of these attacks could have been buffed, right? So if I had Toxic, I could have used Toxic to buff this by 2 points of damage. If I had a Chrome, I could have buffed that kick by 1. After this phase, the opponent is going to get a chance to use any Neon to counter throughout the turn. And that's really big. Depending on what characters that you have, you're going to be able to counter. There's a lot of really cool abilities in this giant stack of characters that you'll be able to do. So after that, we kind of clean things up. There's an appropriate discard pile for each other pile, just adjacent to on the opposite end of the table from where the pit stop area is. And then you're going to go back into the next turn, and that's going to be the pit stop. So what you're going to do is each player is going to draw 3 brawl cards, and you're going to add that to your hand. You can have a max of 7 cards, and then you're going to be able to decide whether or not you want to bank these cards. And if you decide to bank the card, they're worth so many points. So this card here is worth 3, this card's worth 2. So I could say, you know what, I'm going to take this Natural Raise and the Super Toxic, I'm going to bank that for $5. Now, if it's in the bank, it doesn't actually convert to currency until the next turn. But on the next turn, I'll be able to basically buy whatever I want from these decks. And that's really cool. So that's a basic rundown of how Neo City Rumble is going to work. So follow me back to the shelf. Bevan and I are going to give you our final thoughts. That's it for Neon City Rumble. Again, Davey Ragnarok has got a really interesting game on its hands. When I first got this game, I was a little hesitant because there was a lot more components in this game than I thought there was going to be. And it wasn't until actually Bevan came over and we actually started playing this together, I realized how simple this game is to play. It took me a few turns to kind of get into it, but after that, I think when I drew my first weapon card and got used to that whole pit stop system, is when the game really started to shine for me.
Yeah, I felt the same way, and I do with many games where when somebody's just reading through the rules, there's so many buzzwords that are unique to a game, and it can be a little difficult to understand what you're getting into, but I felt the same way. By about turn 3 or so, I felt like I was in the groove and understood what was going on. And that is saying something when you have a game that does have as many kind of new, unique words and keywords like the neon and Cosmo and all these different words that I'm unfamiliar with going into the game. To pick it up in 3 turns was pretty refreshing, so that was good.
Yeah, I actually really enjoyed the quality of the different components in this game too. There's quite a few mini dice included to track health. There's a really, really nice coin that's included in this thing, and the card stock themselves very nicely done. The production value, I don't think could get any higher for a card game like this. Really nice. Everything fits in this one little box, and there is a ton of stuff to do in here. It plays 1 to 4 players. I think you're primarily going to be playing this one-on-one or head-to-head, but there are different ways for a triple threat or even a team-based game and different variants like that included in the game to give you that much more variety. And when you're talking about that deep or that depth of a roster, there's so many different combinations of fighters that you could pick. And that I don't necessarily know that if you're into fighting games that you would ever run out of games to play with this thing. That being said, I'm not typically into fighting games very much. I enjoy playing them, but if I were to go to a buddy's house and play Mortal Kombat, I would really enjoy it for probably 20 minutes, and then I would be probably killed more times than I care to, and then storm off and rage, which I tend to do.
Sounds right.
So, no, I just, there's only so much of that repetitiveness of a fighting game that I could take. I really enjoy tabletop fighting games much more than I do the actual incarnations of them, or in the video form, rather. Let's talk a little bit about the theme.
Okay.
Right? So, my biggest point with this game, and maybe if there's anything negative that I had to say about this thing, is I think the theme itself is unique in that it is a love letter to all things 90s and video games and that culture. But there's a lot of black marks in that culture that I'd care to forget. And I think this game includes some of those and goes way beyond on some of that. I will say, if you're a teenage guy, maybe 14 or up, you're going to absolutely love this game. There's a lot of humor in it that I think you'd really enjoy. That being said, if you're a little more sensitive to that kind of thing, this game does have a mature rating, so you should definitely be mindful of that. It's probably not one to play for the kids. Some of the artwork is a little risque.
Yes.
But that's that. That was my impression of it. I can see this thing selling like crazy with 16 to 17-year-old guys playing it at a card shop.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's definitely fun. There's like you said, a little bit of the artwork is kind of pushing the envelope a little bit. I don't care, but I can see that some people would.
Yeah, we can see that, and we definitely want to be mindful whenever we're suggesting games, which we're kind of doing here. So, I think Neon City Rumble is a hit for anybody that's into tabletop fighting games. There's a lot mechanically, I think, very, very sound and very fun. Again, it took us about halfway through that first game for me to really kind of get it and enjoy it. And then by the end of the game, I was really liking it and would like to play it again. So I could see myself definitely playing this one again, and I can see this being a big hit for you guys who enjoy fighting games.
I agree. It was fun. Had a good time.
Awesome. Well, that being said, if you guys liked the video, please give us a thumbs up. Link us in the comment below, or rather, write us in the comments below and tell us what game you'd like to see us do next. Or throw a link in there. You know what? Hit us up on LinkedIn. That'll work. That's what I was trying to say.
I'm not on LinkedIn.
Oh, don't do that then. You can get us on Twitter, though, at Let's Level Up, and at Facebook at facebook.com/Let's Level Up, DOTNET. That's letslevelup.net. Again, all of that information is available to you on our website, letslevelup.net. And we appreciate you guys. If you guys like the video, again, give us a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Tell your friends, because that's what really gets us the big bucks. And by bucks, I mean no sort of monetary investment. So, yeah. Anyway, until next time, guys, thank you again for watching, and game on.
Thanks, guys.